Imagine you're sitting in a doctor's office. You're not there for stomach pain. You're there because you've been anxious, foggy, and have low energy. Brain fog, they call it. The doctor listens, nods, and then says something unexpected. I want to start by examining your gut. You blink. My gut? And then she explains, you've got two brains, the one in your head and the one in your gut. And they talk to each other all day long. And that's not a metaphor, that's reality. You've got about 500 million neurons in your gut, more than actually in your spinal cord, and trillions of microbes that produce neurotransmitters, hormones, and immune signals that shape how you think, how you feel, and how you age. And today, we're driving into that gut-brain connection and why it may be one of the most important frontiers in neuroscience today.
Welcome to Neuroscience Digest, powered by my BrainWise coach. I am Bastian.
And I'm Phil Dixon.
And we are so thrilled that you have joined us for another episode of Neuroscience Digest, where we go through some of the most recent research in the field of neuroscience. And Phil helps us understand exactly what it might mean for our individual lives. And so you've heard in our little story that Phil just shared with you, we've got a really cool and really exciting conversation to have today about the gut and brain connection. And if you are enjoying this discussion and you're enjoying our podcast, give us a 5-star review, leave a comment, like, subscribe, share this podcast with your friends and family, because it really does help our BrainWise community continue to grow. Phil, talk to us a little bit about what exactly can our BrainWise friends expect when listening to this discussion today on the gut-brain connection.
So let me go back a moment, and what I look for is interesting things that come across my desk in the way of neuroscience. In the last week or so, there's been 4 or 5 major articles that have come out of new research, and they're all talking about the interconnection between the brain and the gut. And we used to tend to think that the brain and the gut was a one-way street, but now we know that it's actually a highly busy, trafficked, two-way street. And so what we're looking at doing is trying to give you some background about why it's important, not just for how you feel and what's going on with your stomach, but that how impactful that is on how your brain is working and reacting on a moment-by-moment basis. So the bottom line of it is taking care of your stomach is also taking care of your brain.
Interesting. And I want to start maybe at the very beginning if we can, or maybe the basics. What exactly is the gut-brain axis, maybe someone might call it, or another way to describe it is the gut-brain superhighway. What is that and why is that important?
It is literally, it's again, superhighway is not a metaphor. It actually is. And we call it the vagus nerve. And more we're realizing the importance of the vagus nerve. And, we think of it of a highway as a two-way street, right? About 80% of the traffic on that nerve goes from the gut to brain, not the other way around, which is what we originally thought. And your microbes in your gut produce that 95% of your body's serotonin. And it also produces dopamine, a thing called GABA, and so other fatty acids that reduce inflammation. So it's not just what we expected the gut to do, which was absorb food and get it into the blood system. It actually is quite a chemical factory. And what we've learned in the last decade or so is that gut bacteria tend to reduce stress hormones. They certainly influence anxiety and depression. They shape our immune responses, and they affect our cognitive aging.
Interesting. And Phil, one of the things that I remember you talking about is that the gut doesn't seem to whisper to the brain. It shouts at it.
It does.
And so
it
what
basically
is that
says, pay attention to me.
And it seems that when the microbiome is diverse and balanced, the brain gets signals of safety. And when it's inflamed or depleted, the brain shifts into threat mode. Is that correct and accurate to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Then one of the things we find and we're going to talk a little bit about the microbiome today. And then in the next section, The next digest will actually about the microbiome because it's such an important part of this. But one of the things we found is that people with anxiety and depression often have lower microbial diversity, i.e., their microbiome isn't as diverse as it should be. And that seems to have major impact. Now, we're also studying which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Do you get anxiety and depression because you've got a lack of diversity, or anxiety and depression causes that lack? We're still going to have that discussion. But one of the major pieces of research found that there were two specific genera of bacteria that were consistently depleted in people with depression.
Wow.
So here's the bizarre thing, is when researchers transplanted that gut bacteria from those anxious humans into mice, the mice became anxious too.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
It truly is. It is amazing. I don't like to think of myself as a mouse, but I can think that there's probably some relationship in how our bodies react in some ways.
Yeah. And so it's fun to talk about that, but here's the hopeful part about it. When people improve their diet, increase their fiber, reduce processed foods, take targeted probiotics, they often find that their overall mood improves. They're no longer as anxious and depressed. But if you want a sort of big metaphor, your gut is not just your stomach. It's a dynamic ecosystem which is driving a lot of activity in our brains and our bodies.
Very interesting. And I know another thing that we talked about or that you shared that is connected to this also is that as we age, our microbiome becomes less diverse. Can you share a little bit as to why that is happening or what actually is happening in that particular space and maybe why it's important for us?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, there's a number of dynamics that we can specifically address. It's number one, if you're sedentary, i.e. not getting any exercise. Number two, if you tend to live in isolation. And number three is if you're eating a very narrow diet and not a very diverse diet, then you tend to get less and less diverse in the microbiomes. But there's some recent studies. There's one study that found a thing they're starting to could be called super agers. And that's people in their 90s, late 80s and 90s with very sharp cognition. And they have microbiomes that look more like a 30-year-old. And they actually just a study I read this morning turned around and said these super agers, they have a greater percentage of neurons that are immature. They're still growing. And we still haven't researched why that is, but 80s and 90-year-olds have a higher percentage of neurons that are still being, they call it neurogenesis, and they're growing new neurons in their 80s and 90s. 25, 30 years ago, we used to think that once you were born, that was it. That was the number of neurons you got. That's proven to be completely incorrect. That's to one aside. Studying super agers seems to be giving us lots of new information about what's going on.
Very interesting. And one of the things, Phil, that you've talked about a little bit is in terms of the microbiome is related to the food, fiber, and all the things that we're consuming. So can you talk to us a little bit about what does that mean? Maybe it's even a statement around what your microbiomes want you need to eat type situation, but what does all of that mean and why is it important for us in that particular area?
It seems that we've always been told eat the correct diet and eat a Mediterranean diet and lots of ideas, but it does seem to be it's not just the dietary impact on your body, but your dietary impact on the brain and your overall mood or your mental psychology and all those sort of things. And it seems that increasing the diversity of your microbiology reduces stress, it reduces inflammation, it increases your ability to sleep, and it increases your brain's ability to create new neurons and adapt. So what's wrong with this picture? It's a great picture. Get a better diet. It does lots of things for you.
Which includes things like fiber, fermented foods, and really just overall diversity. And I think no one's probably going to find this particular statement surprising because I think it's been a part of the conversation for a while now, but maybe not related in this particular area, is that a Stanford study found that eating 6 servings of fermented foods per day, which is like yogurt, sauerkraut, things like that, significantly reduced inflammation in just 10 weeks, which I find really fascinating. My question would be, and maybe we don't have the answer yet, is technically sourdough is a fermented food, right? Because it's the fermentation process is ultimately how it rises. Does that count?
Yeah, I don't know. But what I have to say is, and how do I put this delicately? I'm not a lover of sauerkraut.
I'm not either.
No, I'm not a lover of kimchi either. Some people are. And if you like it, or you like those things, great, good on you. But yogurt, as you mentioned, and kefir, and many of these probiotics now are providing those same things, liquid probiotics. So you don't have to go into the extremes of what I would call the extremes of kimchi or something like that to actually get the benefits. So don't let sauerkraut and kimchi put you off. There's alternative pathways.
Right. Eat a good thing of Greek yogurt that has some fruit in it or something. That can certainly serve. And then, of course, there are so many different probiotic supplements now that I'm sure are equally as good as you were just describing it. And Phil, I have another thought or another thing for us to talk about, I think, in this relationship, because you've talked about a little bit around stress, sleep, and the gut. Can you dive just a little bit further into that for us and how it's a loop that runs both ways?
You've summarized it perfectly. It's a loop that runs both ways. But in fact, it's like a 3-part loop. It's your gut, it's stress, and it's sleep. And all of those 3 things, if you get increased stress, your sleep's going to go down and your gut diversity is going to go down. If you're not sleeping very well, you'll get more stressed. So the 3 of them interact. And if you remember rightly, we had a conversation probably 3 or 4 months ago, is the stress-sleep interaction. It's very difficult to actually impact those 2 things directly. So now what we're finding is you can start to impact them by focusing on the gut. That's something you can do very directly. The other thing is positivity training. We mentioned that about 3 or 4 months ago. So focusing on your diet and focusing on easy for me to say it yet again, positivity training is probably going to have a double whammy in terms of impacting your stress and sleep. When we started off this, is what can you do about it? Focus on getting the right diet for you. And it's going to be different for a 25-year-old probably than a 70-year-old. So what works best for you? And doing some positivity and brain training. All of those things all help. And you don't necessarily have to go, how am I going to reduce my stress? Although that's a good thing to do as well. All of those things start to interact. It's like a big bowl of spaghetti. You pull on any one of them, you're going to get all of it.
And we shared also increase your fiber intake, whether that's through, which is the best way to do it, is through eating really fibrous foods, but there's also some fiber supplements out there. And then reducing ultra-processed foods. I don't think anyone probably is going to entirely get away from it. I know personally, I like some of the ultra-processed foods are delicious, but I think it's all in moderation, right? It's not elimination in that particular space. It's more reducing it because it does have a fairly significant impact on the overall microbiome, which I think all of those are really great tips.
Yeah, and don't forget what we were talking about in our podcast of last week about the fact that we've been influenced by how people sell to us and what we buy. That's certainly true in the ultra-processed foods. We have been told that they're healthy, that they're great, and you just go do it. It's simple, it's quick, and this and the other. But the impacts of it are not being described.
Absolutely, because it would hurt their sales process.
Yeah.
I think this has been a really good conversation, Phil. And I think here's the big message or the overall headline is your gut is not just digesting food, it's also shaping your brain. And the good news is that it's incredibly responsive. Diet, movement, stress reduction, sleep, social connection, all reshape the microbiome. Your microbiomes are listening to how you live, and they're talking back through your mood, your memory, your resilience, and your aging. And so there's a tremendous amount of things that is impacting, but there are things that we can do intentionally to help improve in that particular area. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our BrainWise friends before we kind of wrap up and say, I'm not sure what the word I was going to use, but goodbye until next time?
Remember all the things we're starting to talk about on a fairly regular basis. Slow breathing, doing 2 or 3 minutes of slow breathing will help everything. Eating the right diet, get connected socially. Turns out loneliness can be a bigger detriment to the brain than either smoking or obesity. That's the level of impact that it has. Exercise doesn't do any harm. Get outside, walk in nature. All of those things, any one of which is good. But when you start doing the mixture of all of them, then the big health flywheel starts to move faster and faster.
No, I think it's great. And I think
there's the title of our next book, The Health Flywheel.
I love it. Perfect. Stay on the lookout for that one. Very good. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Neuroscience Digest, powered by my BrainWise coach. And until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always stay brainwise.